As a young boy, Chris and his father climbed Long Peak in Colorado, in which Chris shows his excitement and passion for climbing. This also foreshadows Chris's drive to keep on going and never giving up on what he believes in.
Chris had a growing fascination with Tolstoy, in which he wanted to emulate his life of giving up all of his wealth for living off the land.
Chris takes this journey to explore transcendentalism and leaves everything behind before long he is released by imitating Jack London's book Call of the Wild, which soon leads to his demise. Everett Ruse was a young artist and poet and writer who explored nature, including the High Sierra, California coast, and the deserts of American Southwest. In late 1934, Everett Ruse also set out alone in the Utah desert. He was never seen again. His fate, while traveling through the remote areas of Utah, has been a mystery for many years, just like Chris Ruse was drawn to the rare adventures of the wild.
In addition to John Krakauer and Everett Ruse, Carl McCunn was an American wildlife photographer. Carl is like Chris because he too was drawn to the Alaskan wilderness. However, by the time mid-August came around, McCunn came to realize that the plane was not coming to pick him up. So just like Chris, McCunn was stranded and running out of food supplies. When McCunn finally realized that there was no hope and that no one was coming to rescue him, he committed suicide by shooting himself with his rifle.
John Waterman is yet another case study. Though he was mentally ill rather than delusional like Chris McCandless, both felt inferior towards their father figures. Krakauer considers Waterman's actions to be sane, possibly only eccentric, and possibly more informed than McCandless's.
Sir John Franklin had many similarities to Chris, even though they lived in different centuries. Franklin can be related to Chris because during Franklin's second voyage, he dealt with starvation to the point that cannibalism is questionable. Also, just like Chris, Franklin and his comrades were very ill prepared for their extreme adventures. Gene Rossellini was also like Chris. He too was a brilliant college student until he dropped out. He even hypothesized whether species had moved too far from its roots to survive, without gunpowder, steel, and other artifacts of civilization. He was too drawn to the Alaskan wilderness, where he lived 30 years in the wild until he repealed his hypothesis. He later planned to live the life out of his backpack and travel the United States, but it was shortly ended when he committed suicide. Lastly, even the author John Krakauer had set out on his own raw Alaskan adventure. Krakauer and Chris were probably the two that had the most similarities. Both of them had that drive and passion for whatever they were doing. They also had poor relationships with their father, and they even risked their lives for their love of the outdoors. To conclude, I believe that Krakauer had told this story without making judgments of Chris because of the similarities he shared with Chris. Krakauer had been in the same position as Chris. They both gave up everything they had to go on their own adventures, and they both had their lives on the line if their adventures became fatal.